Hi everybody, my name is Miss Jen and welcome to Sensory Solutions.
Kitty Quest Children's Museum!
Love of learning starts here.
Today I am going to talk to you a little bit about how to build a sensory bin in your home. I know sensory bins can be a little bit intimidating because they kind of get a rap for being a little bit messy. But there's so much we can learn from them, and if you set your child up for success, it's actually not as hard as it sounds. So first we're going to talk about the right container for your sensory bin. You have a lot of options, obviously. My personal favorite is this bin right here. It is the perfect size, and the sides are tall enough to where if there is a little bit of spillage or if your kiddos get too excited, for the most part, it will stay contained in this container. You can also always go for something a little bit smaller, especially when you're starting out, and especially if your little one has not gotten used to a sensory bin before. We want to set them up for success, and if they've never seen one before, we don't really want to overwhelm them. We want to start really simple. So I personally love this bin, but whatever size is good for your family works. You just want to make sure that you give them these tall sides, but not too tall. We want them to be able to reach inside, but also not set them up for failure by giving them really thin or short sides. So after you've gathered your bin, then you get to decide what goes in. There are so many different options, things you can put in your sensory bin. And I'm going to give you just a couple of examples, but then as this series goes on, we can definitely work through some other ideas. So the first thing you always want to make sure is that it is safe to go in your kiddo's mouth, especially if they are little and still in the phase of wanting to put lots of things in their mouth. We want to make sure that it is safe. So I love things like rice or water or something that if they get it in their mouth, it's going to be okay. But you also need to consider that, especially at the beginning, the chance of them spilling something on the floor is pretty high, it's pretty likely. So we want to make sure that while we're helping them and while we're setting them up for success, we also are setting you up for success so that you are not really upset if something goes all over the floor. I personally like to always put my sensory bin on the floor, especially if the little one you're working with is really little. As they get a little older, the table does work great, but then you run the risk of them flipping it off of the table. So especially when you're starting out, I like to put it on the floor, and then we can work through what goes in and what materials we are using. So today, the example I have is rice. It is so much fun, it's super easy, it's really not that hard to clean up, and it is safe to go in their mouth. So we are going to add some rice to our first sensory bin today. Then after that, we need to think about what materials can go inside. For things like this, I love measuring cups or different scoopers because this skill is very important when they're little, and we can teach them about cause and effect. We can really teach them about this fine motor skill, and there are lots of other things we can learn. So I have gathered for our sensory bin today lots of different things. I have some measuring cups. We can talk a little bit about math, which one's bigger, which one's smaller, things like that. We also have some spoons, which are really good for scooping and that fine motor skill and really working on controlling our movements. I also gathered just some other assorted cups that would be fun for scooping and are also different sizes. And finally, one of my favorite things, ice cube trays. I think these are so much fun. Most people have them in their house, and they're obviously super easy to wash when you're all done. And they're really good for sorting. So especially if you're putting something else in your sensory bin, like tiny little animals, or if they're old enough to not swallow things, you can put beads or tiny puff balls, and then you can work on sorting by color or by size or lots of different things. So these are super useful. They are really useful when you're older for more complex activities like sorting and organizing. But when you're little, it is also just super fun to fill up all of these little holes and then dump them out. So let's get started and build our sensory bin. So I have gone ahead and set up our sensory bin, and just like I said, I think the floor is a really great place to start. It kind of keeps us grounded and less likely to want to dump the bin over. In this bin, I put rice, measuring cups, an ice cube tray, and then I went ahead and threw in some different colored pom-poms. That way we can work on some sorting and recognizing our colors. When it comes to filling the bin up with the rice, I know I mentioned that you want to use a material that you will not be upset if it gets on the floor and also is okay if it goes in their mouth, but the amount that you put in is also very important. You want to put in enough of this material, or in our circumstances, rice, that they can use these scoopers to scoop successfully, but not so much that it's overwhelming and where they want to throw it out of the bin. You want just enough to cover the bottom, at least at first, and then as you work on these sensory bin skills, you can add more and make them a little more complicated and in-depth. Using a sensory bin when you're little is a skill. That's why it's so important, but also we need to take the time to set them up for success and set boundaries for when you're using it. And I know when they're really little, it can be kind of tricky to want to set those boundaries with them. But once you've set them up like this and they know how to use this, they will be much more successful as they go and as they are acquiring more skills. When they're playing with this, I encourage you to play with them, of course, but they can scoop, they can pour. We can ask them to find all the red puffballs and put them on one side. What other colors are there? We can use orange, put all the orange on the other side. We can sort them by color. We can count them. We are learning so many math skills specifically when we use a sensory bin. And that's why I think it's so important to use these in your home, even though it can be a little bit intimidating at first. So today's sensory bin was with rice. Next time, we can set up a sensory bin with something else like water. Water is also super fun and teaches us a lot about cause and effect, as well as sinking and floating. So thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you had fun, and I encourage you to go set up a sensory bin in your house. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe for more videos, and remember to check out our website for additional activities and information.